This is Chilling Tales for Dark Nights. Good evening, listener. I'm Steve Taylor, your host to a horror anthology podcast where we ask you to depart from your safe perception of reality to descend with us into the frightening depths and dark corners of twisted imaginations. With carefully curated original tales of terror each week, our deepest rooted fears are brought to the forefront by a diverse cast of voice talent and masterfully eerie sound design that bring these stories to life. We'll give you tales of unnerving encounters with the occult, harrowing hauntings, and sinister seances that show just how darkness knows no bounds. Make sure to check out Chilling Tales for Dark Nights on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
You're about to hear one of the most terrifying true tales of an aggressive entity on display in front of witnesses that defy all logical explanations to this day. Jackie Hernandez was starting a new chapter in life. She had just gotten married to the father of her 2-year-old son, and she was pregnant with a baby girl. There were happy moments, but this new marriage was rocky. It had its ups and downs, but in 1989, Jackie's new life and dreams fell apart. Her marriage was over. And so she moved to 593 West 11th Street in San Pedro, California. She had to start all over again, but little did she know that her nightmare was just beginning. My name is Edwin, and here's a horror story. Jackie found herself working multiple jobs to be able to afford her small, cozy house. Her kind neighbor, Susan, watched little Jamie and Samantha while Jackie worked. And then small things started happening. Almost too small for Jackie to notice. Maybe she was too tired. She did work a lot. For example, things that she would leave in one spot would end up in another. Objects would move. Little things here and there. It was all too small to notice until Jackie's ex-husband, Al, was visiting. Al, Jackie, and a friend were all sitting in the living room. They were talking when they noticed the pencil holder on the coffee table fly across the room and into the wall. On another occasion, Darlene, another friend of Jackie's, was over at the house. Jackie and Darlene were sitting on the couch, just talking, when suddenly they heard a loud crash. Darlene and Jackie ran into the kitchen where the noise had come from, and it was a painting that normally hung above the fridge that had fallen. But the way that it fell didn't make any sense. It looked like it had been placed on the counter, 5 feet away. The nails that held the painting up were also on the counter, facing up. Someone or something had placed them there. And it only got worse from there, especially at night. Jackie would hear what sounded like pebbles falling to the floor, like they were being dropped from someone's hand. And that wasn't the only strange sound either. There was also a high-pitched tone that would come from the attic. She would also find the entrance to the attic slightly open, even though she couldn't reach it. The only way into the attic was through the laundry room, past the kitchen. Jackie would have needed a ladder or a tall stool to open the attic door. When Jackie found herself standing underneath the entrance to it, though, she would also hear very faint murmurs. It sounded like a conversation between a man and a woman, but she could never understand what they were saying. In the kitchen, Jackie would see ooze dripping out of the walls, from the light switch and from other places, and it would only last a few seconds. Her new cat would stare at the corners and claw at absolutely nothing. This was all very disturbing, but it was small enough for Jackie to just continue ignoring them. But that also changed. In February of 1989, Jackie was woken up around midnight. She was tired from her long hours, but she got up to use the bathroom. Before going back to bed, she decided to check on her kids, so she opened the door to their room and saw an old man. He looked like a corpse, bony and frail, with dead eyes. He was sitting in the middle of the room, facing the door. When she ran inside the room, he was gone, and the kids were peacefully asleep. Still, maybe she was just seeing things. She might have been asleep. It was easy to blame her tired mind, so she just talked herself out of it. On a different night, just a few days later, she found herself waking up at midnight again. She got up to grab a drink from the kitchen, but she stopped right before walking in. The old man from her kids' room was sitting right there, in the middle of the kitchen, cross-legged, just staring at her. At that moment, she just ran back and hid underneath her blankets. She stayed there, frozen in fear. And after what felt like hours, she peeked out, thinking it would be safe. But when she looked out from her blankets, the old man was still there, staring. And this went on all night. Jackie would hide in her blankets and peek out every once in a while, only to see the corpse-like being looking right back at her. Finally, morning time came, and she felt safe enough to leave the blankets. It was a little bit brighter around the house, and she walked over to the attic. It seemed to be the source of everything she had been experiencing in that house, and she needed to see what was in there. And so she grabbed her ladder, pushed open the attic door, and looked inside. And that's when she saw a pudgy head floating toward her. It had no body. Jackie screamed and fell off the ladder. She ran over to her neighbor, Susan, and told her everything. What she had just seen in the attic, the oozing walls, her cat, and what scared her the most, that frail, skinny old man in her house. Jackie was too scared to go back to it. In trying to help, Susan told Jackie that she knew someone they could call for help. Susan called parapsychologist Barry Taft and told him that she could hear the thumping from Jackie's attic. She also told him about everything Jackie had seen, that Jackie was too scared to go back to her home, and that there were 2 children in that house. Barry believed Susan and Jackie and immediately assembled his paranormal investigation team. Barry Taft is a renowned parapsychologist who has worked on some pretty famous cases. If you're into the paranormal and horror movies, then you might recognize the 1980s movie The Entity. In the movie, a woman is brutally attacked by a poltergeist. It's based on the real case, which Barry investigated himself. These are the kind of cases that he and his team looked into. When they got Susan's call, they leapt into action. Barry Taft, Barry Conrad, Jeff Wheatcraft, and a few others arrived at Jackie's house. As soon as they walked in, it just felt off. And maybe you've felt this before. It's a feeling of being underwater, like a sensation of overpressure. There was also a foul odor, and they tried to find a logical explanation for the smell, but they couldn't find one. They could not locate the source no matter where they looked. But once they were all set up and ready to start the investigation, they heard a loud bang in the attic. Then another, followed by a thud, and then another thud. Jackie told them, it's the attic. It's always the attic, and it's where she had seen the floating head. It's also the same spot she kept hearing voices. The team began taking pictures and capturing evidence. Jeff and Barry Conrad went up to the attic to get pictures and footage. And from the moment he set foot in the attic, Jeff felt like something was wrong, like he was being watched. Still, he kept working, and as Jeff clicked the shutter on his camera for the 3rd time, it suddenly flew out of his hands. It was pulled. And then Jeff was pushed and he fell over. And it couldn't have been Barry because he was not close enough to reach him. When he stood up and walked over to grab his camera, the lens was 5 feet away. They came back down from the attic and joined everyone else in the kitchen, and they began to talk about what had just happened in the attic. And then all of a sudden, there were loud thumps coming from up there. They sounded like very loud footsteps. Barry described it as a 200-pound rat. In his own words,
He's walking back and forth up there.
It is walking, definitely.
Yes. Quiet, everyone. Shh, quiet.
Jeff peeked into the attic again, trying to figure out what was making this sound. He had seen a black mass. It moved slowly across the attic and then it just disappeared. The investigation continued and it just got weirder. At around 3 a.m., they all witnessed the oozing liquid coming out of the walls. But still, they could not find an explanation for it. The team then had to leave for the night, but returned days later, on September 4th.
I'm not staying here, Barry. I'm out of here. I gotta get out of here. I can't stay here.
On the night of September 4th, Jackie called Barry again. She was afraid. Her kids' toys were levitating and being thrown around. The paranormal activity seemed to be getting worse, and she didn't want to be there anymore. Here's part of the phone call.
Jackie?
We were talking.
Hello? You just cut the lights.
What happened?
Are you guys there? Are you guys there?
Yeah, yeah.
You know, she won't get any sleep. We better go down and get her.
Jackie?
What?
We're gonna come down and get you. Okay?
Okay.
All right, we're coming right now.
Okay, hurry, please. I don't know how long I can stay here.
We're leaving right now.
Okay, bye-bye. Bye.
Okay, bye.
The crew drove back to Jackie's house, and she thought they were there to take her and the kids somewhere else, but instead, they were there to investigate. They got out of their van and grabbed their equipment. This night turned out to be even more dangerous for Jeff, who had already been pushed by the ghost in Jackie's home. Jeff went back into the attic, and another photographer, Gary Boehm, was on the ladder behind him. Jackie, Susan, and Barry were in the kitchen. Gary was still on the ladder when he heard Jeff scream. Gary moved as fast as he could, using the flash from his camera to see and locate Jeff. He found Jeff with his legs wrapped around a beam in the attic. He was being hung by his neck. Gary helped him out of the attic. The rope was tied in a knot used by sailors and fishermen. It left a red mark on Jeff's neck. And that was enough for Jeff. He left the house and never returned. It was an intense night for everyone. The team wrapped up the investigation and went on their way. They left Jackie, little Jamie, and Samantha with their ghosts. Jackie walked by her kids' room in a moment of rage and yelled, "Just don't touch my kids." Moments later, a random red spot appeared on baby Samantha's forehead. It looked like a red bruise. Jackie felt more afraid than ever. This thing was mocking her, telling her that it can and will touch her kids. It could do whatever it wanted. This was the last straw. Jackie knew she had to leave her San Pedro home. So Jackie took her children and moved just over 300 miles away to a trailer home in Weldon, California. She was trying to give her marriage another chance and make up with her husband. She needed to get away from the entities that were haunting her in San Pedro. For a while, things were good and peaceful, but this only lasted a few weeks. Then, her attempt to reconcile with her husband didn't work. He was drinking more, there were more and more arguments, and he ended up leaving. And once he was gone, the ghosts came back. But what were things like this time? I'll tell you all about it up next. Stay with me. She would hear scratching sounds coming from her shed, sometimes pounding, like something was trying to get out. It was so loud, even her neighbors could hear it. It always happened in the middle of the night, and always 3 at a time, a pause and then 3 more. On another night, Jackie walked into her daughter's room and found her blankets on fire. Luckily, her kids were in her own bed that night. But just a few weeks after that, Jackie and a couple of neighbors were helping her put a TV in her shed. This wasn't like TVs you see today. It was a giant TV that came with its own stand. It easily weighs around 200 pounds. You really needed 3 people to carry it, and Jackie and her 2 neighbors were trying to get her giant TV into the shed when they saw the face of an old man appear on the upper left side of the screen. It scared all of them. Her neighbor described it as an old man with mean eyes. And whoever set foot into Jackie's trailer home experienced something. It felt unbearable, and she knew it was time to call Barry again. But this time, she wasn't sure that they were actually going to come. But they did. They made the long drive to Weldon. The team arrived and set up, and right away, activity began. None of their equipment was working, even though it had been working before they left. Jeff checked the shed and saw a shadow person move inside. Nothing was working and they couldn't get answers. And that's when Jackie made a suggestion. What if they used the Ouija board? And the team agreed. As soon as they were set up, the room grew extremely cold. The candles flickered and the table shook, but they continued to ask their questions. They asked, "How long have you been trapped in the spirit world?"
60 years,
it said. Did you die in the San Pedro house?
No.
Where did you die?
San Pedro Bay.
Did you drown?
No. I was held underwater.
Did you live in the San Pedro house?
My murderer.
How many ghosts are here?
The phantoms fill the skies.
And then Jeff asked, "Why are you focusing your energy on me?"
Because you are the likeness of my killer.
And then Barry asked, "Is there anyone in the room you hate?" J E F F. And right after it finished spelling out Jeff, he was thrown from his chair and hit the wall behind him. And then morning time came and everyone felt safe again. Barry went to the news pilot on 7th Street in San Pedro. They had some newspaper archives he could dig through. He came across one paper with a front page headline that read, "Find body of young seaman under wharf. Marks on body hint man was victim of foul play." They believed this was one of the spirits that had been haunting Jackie for years. Herman Hendrickson was in the Navy. His body was found floating under the San Pedro Pier on March 25, 1930. There was some information that didn't quite match what they learned during the Ouija board session. Herman was found to have hit his own head and then fallen into the water from the pier, accidentally. The spirit that contacted them through the Ouija board said it was murdered, drowned by someone who looked like Jeff. Still, they really believed that the entity was indeed Herman. After discovering the identity of one of the spirits, Jackie grew curious. She started talking to some of her old 11th Street neighbors, the ones who had been there the longest. She figured out that her old house was built by a man named John Damon, who later died in the house. She believed that this was the old man she had been seeing and the one who appeared on her TV in Weldon. Since John Damon lived in the house, could he have been the man who murdered Herman Hendrickson? There was no way to be certain, but it could explain why both spirits were causing so much harm. In June 1990, Jackie and her kids moved again, this time to an apartment in San Pedro. As soon as they moved in, Jackie had a priest come and bless the apartment. She didn't want the haunting to continue. And thankfully, not much happened in there. She only ever saw a glowing orb in her kitchen, and it was only one time. Based on everything else she had experienced, this was nothing. Jeff and Barry, on the other hand, began noticing things were happening in their apartment. Their stuff was being moved. Their pictures were turned upside down. One of their windows was randomly broken. Lights were turning on and off. Barry was pushed by an unseen force, and it was getting dangerous. Like one time, the cleaning lady was sweeping the kitchen in their apartment. She turned to the living room and saw a frail and almost dead-looking man sitting on the floor. He was cross-legged and had dead eyes. They believed it was the same old man that had been haunting Jackie. Luckily for them, this only lasted a few weeks. It started when Jackie had moved back to San Pedro, even though they were a few cities away. But over the weeks, the paranormal activity slowed down. And remember that orb that Jackie had seen? Well, here's what happened. While in her apartment, Jackie saw a ball of light, and she followed it, and it led her to a nearby graveyard. The light kept moving until it reached a grave. It floated in circles a few times until it disappeared. The grave read John Damon. Jackie believed that the ghost that had been haunting her for years was just saying goodbye. The paranormal activity pretty much ended after that for everyone involved. In 1997, Jackie and the team returned to her old San Pedro home because they were finishing up the documentary on what happened. They found out from the owners that people came and went, but no one stayed in the house for long. They also learned it wasn't just Jackie who had been experiencing strange things. A pair of newlyweds lived in the neighborhood from 1987 to 1995. And one night, her husband was walking in the hallway on his way to bed. That's when he saw a figure of a man standing in the doorway, the one of their newborn's room. He saw the old man step into the room of the doorway and he raced over. He was ready to fight this intruder, but when he stepped inside, no one was there. Just his sleeping baby in the crib. The entire time they lived in the house, the wife was paranoid, and this was out of character for her. And they also saw an oozing liquid coming out of the walls of their closet. They would hear footsteps in the hallway and conversations they could not understand. It was too much for them, and they left in 1995. After she left, Jackie's house sat empty for some time. Neighbors would see the blinds open and close from the inside. You could also hear loud groans and the murmurs of a conversation that could not be understood. This all ended when the house was torn down. And even today, if you walk down West 11th Street in San Pedro, California, there is no 593 address. It just isn't there. All we have left are the accounts, the photographs, and the terrifying memories to remind us of 593 West 11th Street. If you like this episode, send it to someone who might like it too. Your app has a way to grab a link and share it. This episode was researched and written by Cristina Lomagi, who also mentions in the notes that she had walked around the area this past summer. Her cousins used to live nearby, and the house number is in fact skipped, going from 591 to 595 West 11th Street. To listen to these episodes completely ad-free, head on over to scaryplus.com. You'll be able to listen to the podcast right here on this app, just without ads. To get in touch with me and to stay up to date with my upcoming YouTube channel, you can find me over on Instagram or TikTok at Edwin Cove. That's EDWINCOV. Thank you very much for listening. See you soon.